So today I want to talk a little bit about um, this psychology of surviving and keeping your sanity in this world and what we're facing. I was going to title this kind of wanted to title it like a motivational thing, but it really didn't. It really doesn't have to apply so much as motivation, but more of the psychology of um, dealing with stress and dealing with the situation we face existing in this world. So it's going to be more towards the psychology of surviving and maintaining your sanity. The first thing you have to understand um, is that they are moving this country in a very specific direction with all of the propaganda and all of the stuff that you see going on politically and you see going on amongst the internet and various different platforms. And it's all designed to move this country in a very specific direction with the psychological warfare and the military grade propaganda that you see on a daily basis, which is all that you see. The news, the politics, and everything in between, every aspect of life. Um, you can't even go to the certain gyms like I'm not going to mention any names, but starts with a P and ends with an F, two-word. You can't go in certain places without seeing this psychological propaganda in your face every single day. From the products that you buy to the food that you eat to the places that you go to the people that you talk to that are extensions of that propaganda because their minds have been assimilated into it and they have thoroughly been indoctrinated into it. The workplace, the people you talk to, etc., etc., etc. All of it is propaganda everywhere you go. And so you're surrounded by psychological warfare 24/7. Um, when you go to work or when you're even driving on the street with advertisements, which are another form of psychological propaganda, psychological warfare. And like I said, this is all designed to move this country in a very specific direction for a very specific end goal. And that part of that end goal is to have people be these hive-minded, asexual individuals that do not have any personality or any individualism whatsoever. This propaganda is designed to have people fall in line with a very specific way of thinking, mainly towards that of having people be in this hive-minded system of these asexual, hive-minded drones. They do not want people to have individuality. They do not want people to have a personality, and they do not want people to think independently or have any kind of opinion for themselves. And this is part of the reason behind a lot of this propaganda. It's partly due to having people fall in line with a collectivist mindset, which is given by people that are social engineers. They present it to the public in such a way that it makes you have the illusion that you're having a choice. Like politics is a great example. You have two choices, which ain't many, and then they also give you the independent choice, which people think that's the way to go because that's away from the system, so it must mean that's the individual choice. I have an individual choice because it's not part of the system. Well, that's bullshit because everything is part of the system. Anything that they present to the public is part of the system, and it is designed to sway the public and the world in a very specific direction. So anything that they put out there in the media is propaganda, designed to keep and get people to be moved towards a specific direction with a very specific mindset. One thing that you find, and this moves into the second thing, which is relationships, that have been covered extensively amongst a lot of people on YouTube, the whole epidemic of transsexuals and homosexuality. Like I said, all of these things are a stepping stone towards, in my opinion, the society to become this asexual, hive-minded collectivist system. And when you look at the whole gender thing, you see, you have to understand that, and like I said, this has been covered many times amongst a lot of people on the internet, is that a lot of men particularly that are not aware of certain things that most of us know already. They want to be in relationships with women. They want to have a family. They want to have kids, maybe. Like I said, the ones that are not aware of the reality of the system and what the propaganda has done. There are people there, we call them blue pill individuals, that still want these things because they're not aware of the way that the system works. And men get frustrated because they can't have what they so desperately want. And so they turn to, because they're unaware of these things, they turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms, such as drug use, or homosexuality, or it can go even to more extremes, such as hardcore violence, which is quite common. To vent that frustration, men have testosterone, and thus they get angry and they get frustrated because they don't understand what's going on. They do not understand the propaganda, the psychological warfare that has been waged on them and on the people from every facet of life, from the time they were born and will be until the time they die. So this frustrates them, and this gets them very angry. The old way of doing things, of having a man and a woman be together, is done away with. It is now the trendy thing to do is to be a transsexual or a homosexual, or the ultimate goal is to have them either be an asexual, which I know a couple people, so this isn't pushed towards those individuals that have mentioned that to me privately, but it is what their agenda is. And so the trendy thing to do is to be a homosexual or a transsexual or whatever other fucking propaganda they have decided people that they want to be. Homosexuality is not the end goal. It is nothing more than a stepping stone, and the stepping stone is to have people have no identity whatsoever, to have no individuality. They want to get rid of anything individual, or anything that makes a person an individual, down from their gender all the way to their belief systems, what they buy and what they want to buy, or what they want to, where they want to go. It's all the advertisements when you go into cities or certain places is all designed, the way that they use colors, the way that they lay out the streets, is the way that they put even certain walkways, sidewalks, are designed to get people, to even lead them into, specifically even modern day cities, is designed to lead them in like shopping districts, to have them buy and consume, because the propaganda that they are instilling in these stores that have you want to buy and consume is all designed again to limit your individuality, because you've been given pre-selected choices, not ones of your own. That's why they guide you towards these, with these different forms of manipulation towards that. But going back to the homosexuality and the transsexualism, they want to get rid of any individuality all the way down from the gender. The gender is a basic fundamental thing that dictates individuality, because if you're a man and you have testosterone, you're going to live your life as a man in a very specific way. You're not going to do girly things if you're a man. And the old system is, the common sense system, I should say, men do manly things and women do feminine things, or men do masculine things and women do feminine things. That has been done away with. That has been done away with in many different respects as to how they have manipulated people to get rid of the identity and individualism of people. And it all really starts with the sexuality of people, because that is the fundamental basics that dictate how people will behave in personal life, in public, and etc. Another experiment that was done, and another example of this, was how clothes were made. Basically, they started feminizing male clothes and masculinizing female clothes. Also, they were over-sexualizing female clothes and male clothes too, which is kind of interesting and bizarre at the same time, because they're trying to eliminate that. But aside from that, men's clothing became more tight-fitting and became definitely more feminine. I remember they had the whole epidemic of the skinny jeans, which they still do. It's called slim fit, and that's all trying to feminize the aspects of clothing, because women typically wear tightly fit clothing that is slim. Men don't. Well, they're not supposed to, but that's what they're trying to do. So this is an example of how they've tried to invert people to be these asexual, genderless people through consumer products such as clothing. But it is all designed, now the homosexuality is all leading towards asexualism, which is why they have so many different acronyms for gender. It's because they want people not to have the ability to identify with the old system that they have instilled, which basically is the common sense system, or I should just say it's fucking common sense, period, is that a man is born a man and a woman is born a woman. Anything in between that is extremely rare to have a hermaphrodite, so to say, literally, in terms of the genitalia being both man and woman, is extremely rare. In that case, yes, they would be considered a hermaphrodite. But that is so rare that it is there's no point of even bringing it up, but they want to instill that, and that's why they have so many different genders to confuse people, and they reinstill that through the psychological warfare and propaganda that they wage on the public. And it's all designed to get people to be these non-genderless or non-specific gendered people, so that they become these asexual, hive-minded collectivists with no identity and no personality. So when we go back to relationships, like I said, men get very frustrated because they don't understand what's going on. The ones that are not awake and aware of certain aspects of things through the propaganda that they've been waging and the psychological warfare that they've been waging. It's all designed to move things in a specific area. So men get very frustrated because they don't know this, because the men out there that are not aware, like we are, of the situations that we're facing, they want to have a woman, they want to have a family, but then they realize that the women hate them and the world hates them, and they don't know why. And so they lash out and they get very frustrated because they don't understand what's going on. They have made attempt after attempt, and again, you see the propaganda reinforced with things like PUA and pickup artistry to keep them on the hamster wheel, so to say, to keep the illusion that everything is fine and to have them maintain it, but it doesn't ever work, and they know it doesn't work. And so they'll either fall in line or they will self-destruct through unhealthy coping mechanisms, such as drug use, alcoholism, or violence. They join gangs as ways to try to find some kind of a brotherhood of some sorts, so that they do not feel so isolated and alone, which in an asexual, collectivist, hive-minded society, everybody is alone, because everybody does not have a personality. They do not have they don't have any individualism, so they're all isolated from each other. And we see this a lot about how they have manipulated the ability for people to communicate as well, with things such as moving towards text and instant messaging, social media, communicating through those things instead of actually having a vocal conversation with somebody. And this has led a lot to chaos and misunderstandings amongst people, as such as with text messaging, um, you cannot accurately portray or express what you've been really trying to say, so this misleads a lot of proper communication with people. And this is another psychological warfare tactic that was used specifically amongst the dating scene, where they wanted to move this towards online dating because of the fact that they knew that misunderstandings and chaos through communication would be waged, because man and woman on those sites would not be able to express their vocal tonality that accurately portrays communication properly. And so many misunderstandings would be brought about out of that, and there would be no ability for any kind of successful mating in that process. That's a very detailed aspect of psychological warfare that they have used. And it goes not just through online dating, but that falls into the category of my topic here under relationships. It also translates itself into modern day society in many different respects, especially for people who don't know how to communicate properly and express that through things like texting and whatnot, or whatever, if they had to do so. So these are all different forms of psychological warfare that they've been waging on the public. And this is another thing that they've been doing. So on the subject of relationships, like I said, men who are not aware of these things will end up being very frustrated, and they don't know why women hate them so much, and they don't know why they go after them in court. And this is all due to not just the propaganda that has been waged on the sexes, this gender war that goes all the way back to that tennis match that I can't remember what it was called, the Battle of the Sexes. This is something that has been happening since the beginning of time, because of the way that this system works and of the elements that are evil that run this place, this hell world. And it's taken many different forms. In this day and age, in this cycle, in this age, it's taken the form through technology and high sophisticated methods of psychological propaganda and warfare, as opposed to back in the day, it took a different form. But nonetheless, this is something that has been going on since the beginning of time. And through any cycle of history, you have the beginning stages where it's not so bad, but then towards the end they ramp it up quite a bit, and things go downhill pretty fast. And that's what we're at right now. As we can see, we can all look outside our window. Why do you think we're in this position, and why I'm even having to discuss this to begin with shows you where we're at, that things have taken things are not going too well. But needs to be mentioned nonetheless. So men get very frustrated, and they don't know why things are the way that they are, and it has to do with everything I've been mentioning. It's the way that this world is, it's the propaganda, it's the psychological warfare, to the most minuta and minutia of details that they have waged on the public. So the old system of a man being with a woman is out of the window and no longer relevant. Now the thing to do is to be a homosexual or a transsexual, and you get to have all the sex you want, and you get to go to the parties, and you get to have people like you and be attracted to you because you're trendy and it's what's cool to do now. But the flip side to the problem with that is that there's a lot of STDs amongst that circle in the trendiness of being a homosexual, or having no gender or any kind of identity, as well as the promiscuousness regardless of regular male to female relationships. A lot of STDs, a lot of and mainly a lot of insanity to go along with that. Another reason why, another psychological aspect to this, which is going to lead me into another topic here, is the fact that, like I've mentioned, they want to move people towards a very specific direction, and through this psychological warfare and propaganda, it is in many ways a weeding out process. Those there will be those that survive, or in other words, there will be those that fall in line with what they are wanting people to be, such as the whole gender thing with homosexuality and transsexuals. You do that, you get all the rewards, right? You fall in line, you get what you want. And then there will be those who don't. Another aspect to, I think, that they've been doing through psychological warfare and propaganda is to weed people out, to figure out who's gonna fall in line and who's not. The people that do not fall in line, or do not have the ability to have the mental strength to be individuals and to learn how to find healthy ways of coping with the way that things are moving now, will self-destruct. They will find unhealthy ways of coping, such as rampant promiscuity, which increases the ability for STDs, which then increases the ability for people to not have kids. You might ask yourself in many ways that you think, well, why is it that they increase promiscuity and have increased the ability for people to have kids? Well, it's because that's just going to happen naturally, you see. But the bottom line is those people will be done away with due to their unhealthy lifestyles. They will not survive very long, because you can't be an idiot even when they support it. It's kind of like trying to herd all the sheep to find out where all the sick ones are. Have them all breed out at a certain point and then kill them all off, because then you've kind of isolated the population. It's a form of population control, basically. So through this propaganda, they want to weed out who's going to be falling in line with this collectivist system and who is not. The ones that aren't, like I mentioned, will usually find unhealthy coping mechanisms or drug use or whatever it is, and they will self-destruct. So that's another observation I think I've made, that another thing about why that is. So now I'm going to get into the coping mechanisms. So like I mentioned, a lot of people, and one other thing before I move on, going back to my main point about the relationships, and this is all part of my what I will end this on here at the end, after I'm done, about coping mechanisms and finding ways of coping with this world and all of this that we're dealing with here, is that another reason why relationships fail is because, due to the amount of psychological warfare and propaganda that has been waged for some time, and a long time, people have lost their minds. The other thing that I forgot to mention regarding these, let's say you fall in line with all this gender stuff and you see people that turn transsexual or homosexual, they have lost their minds. Their minds are gone, because they've been assimilated into the system of the collectivist, hive-minded system. They have no personality. They have no individuality whatsoever, and they have a personality about as dry as a piece of wet card. I mean, they have a personality about as blunt and boring as a piece of wet cardboard. And they don't know how to communicate properly. They don't have any ability to communicate and show any kind of individuality, because they've fallen in line. And they're insane. Most women are insane because of all of this stuff. The constant, who you assimilate with and who you associate with, and you're constantly associating yourself with people that are dysfunctional. It's going to rub off on you, and you're going to pick up bad habits, and then in return, it's going to cause you to start to lose your sanity. You see, this whole thing is like a fucking virus. It's like a virus. It just, the people that are sick, are going to, you have a sickness, it's going to rub off on you. Well, this is a psychosis sickness. This is, I forgot, it might have been, I can't remember. It's like it's a psychological sickness that rubs off on people. And so when you start assimilating yourself with those kind of people, it's not the promiscuity, not necessarily, unless you're doing some promiscuous acts that are really not good for your mind. it's going to be the people and their dysfunctional habits that end up making you dysfunctional, and that will rub off, which is why that leads to things like insanity and people's minds just being completely fucking mush. Which that reminds me, before I move on to my next topic, I'm going to talk about something else here, which is going to lead into coping mechanisms. Well, I guess I should just leave that with coping mechanisms then. The people you associate with. So, pardon me while I vape. I really hope this talk helps some people out understand, and when I get into the coping mechanisms here and finding peace and how to deal with it, I hope that helps. But I wanted to lead this up to that, is to understand where we're at in a nutshell. It's very complex, and this video is going to be a bit long, but I have to get this out there because this is something I've been working on. I had to figure out the right way of presenting it in such a way that people might be able to understand what I'm saying. But I hope this helps, and I hope by the end of this talk, you can have a little bit of motivation, or maybe the word's not motivation, but an understanding of where things are. And this stuff is very complicated, and it's very hard to explain to a lot of people, but I'm just trying to, it took me some time to kind of surmise in a nutshell of why this world, and why specifically people are the way that they are. And it has to do with the propaganda and the warfare and the other aspects of things that have been going on, but a lot of it is a result of psychological warfare. That's one of the main aspects to this. I'm not going to get into the occultic things. It'll be a little bit too much for people, and it would take up way too much time of this video to explain. But I'll leave that out of it. I'm just making this as simple as possible for people to understand. So let's move on. When we talk about coping mechanisms, I was mentioning before about unhealthy coping mechanisms. Because of this psychological propaganda and psychological warfare that has made people so completely dysfunctional now. And you know what, I'm sorry to keep interrupting as I move forward, but there's things that keep coming to my mind that I keep forgetting to bring up that, as a result of me talking about one thing, it makes me lead into another thing. Another reason why relationships are not working is that even when you do see a man and a woman together, which is, when you think about it, and you do see, there's not many young couples out there anymore. There's not many young couples. If there are, most of them are very dysfunctional, and that's a result of the propaganda and etc., all the other stuff I mentioned, that has been going on since they were kids. And the younger that you're born into this world, by the time you reach mid to adolescence, early teenage years to mid-adult years, the propaganda will be increasingly worse. So the people will be increasingly more dysfunctional, unfortunately. But when you do see a man and a woman together in some form of relationship, they are typically very dysfunctional, and you can tell this by the way that they act in public, the way that they interact with each other. They're very distant. So even when you do see man and woman coming together, there's a lot of nuances and subtleties that you see amongst them if you know what to look for psychologically and learning how to learn about the psychology of people. You can pick up on the dysfunction without them even having to show it. It's just natural. You can just tell right away. So unfortunately, even when you do see man and a woman together, it's quite usually both of them are dysfunctional, and in most cases they have a history of dysfunction in their family, which then carries on into the relationship, which in many cases they don't have the intelligence or the knowledge to be able to fix that, or the patience, or the want to anyway. They don't give a fuck. They're going to do what they want to do, so those relationships don't last very long. And I think we all know that from our personal experience, don't we? Now let's talk about coping mechanisms. you're going to have to find a way to cope with what you know now. Some people know things, some people know more than others, but I think after this lecture we all have a general idea, and all of us, I think, already know things are pretty fucked up. And so we have to find ways of coping. You know, that's why, you know, for me, I like to go to the gym. I like to play video games with friends. I like doing these videos when I do them. I like talking and discussing with friends about certain topics, certain subject matter that is a form of therapy for me to get this out of my head sometimes. But I like to go to the gym. I like to do little projects here around the house, and I have to give a shout out to Warhorse, you know, because that is a big thing he instilled, is to tell men, keep yourself busy and work on projects around the house, and do things that you enjoy, do hobbies that you enjoy. Because the thing is, the reason why you have to have a coping mechanism is because of the fact that if you do not fall in line, which we still have our individuality, which is, you know, why we're all here. And we want to know what's going on. We know that we're not part of them, whoever they are, the collective. We don't want to be part of the collective. So we still have our individuality. We still have our own personality. Some of us don't. But those who do know what I'm talking about. We have to find ways of coping, because the problem is, and this ties into my subject of why men get frustrated and they end up, you know, finding unhealthy ways of coping, is because when you dwell on these things and the way they're moving this world and this country in this very specific direction, if you dwell on the past and wishing that things were different, it will destroy you, because it's not going to change. And so men, you know, I used to do this too. I used to sit and watch a movie, and I think, God, I really, you know, God, I wish I could have that, and I wish things were different, and I wanted to have this and that. Then before you know it, my whole night is fucking shot. Now I'm depressed, and now I have to sit in my room and think about it all night long. And you know, it's a bummer. So you cannot dwell on those things that are no longer in the system that they're moving this system towards. The old way of doing things. This has been an ongoing discussion amongst the people of the, you know, MGTOW community. We know that women are not going to change. We know that the old system of doing things is not going to revert back to some magical thing that we want. It's not going to go that way. And so the more you dwell on those things and wishing about the things that you couldn't have or that you wish you did have, you will fall into depression, and you will find ways of coping in an unhealthy manner, because you allowed that to dwell into your mind. So you have to find healthy ways of coping. For me, it's the gym. For me, it's, you know, talking with friends, playing video games with friends, doing little projects here and there, going outside, going for a walk. These are just my ways of coping. And this is one of the reasons why, with certain knowledge that I have, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to tell people about it, because I have wrestled with certain information that I know about how bad things really are. It's taken me years and years and years to wrestle with those things that I know. So I have found my ways of coping with that information. If I tell somebody else, they're probably not going to be able to handle it, or have the patience or the mental fortitude to get through it, like it took me all those years to learn how to cope with it. And that person can fall into unhealthy ways of coping, and, you know, they feel doomed and that there's no way out. For me, I have advanced to the point where you can tell me that we're doomed and there's fucking no way out, and it doesn't really bother me anymore, because I know how to cope with it. But if you tell somebody that they haven't spent the time to learn how to master their own mind, then it could end up leading them down a very dark path, which that is not the intention here. We don't want to make things any harder than they need to be. We want to make things easy. easy as they can while we exist in this fucking hell world that we're all in. We don't want to make things any more difficult. So that's one reason why I don't go into certain details about certain things. So we must find healthy ways of coping, which takes time. It takes a lot of practice. Because the thing about it is that it's a constant battle to find peace. It is a constant battle to find peace. And the thing you have to understand is, even when you have healthy ways of coping, like for me, I like to go to the gym, I like to do cardio, it makes me feel better. Even at times when I do that, I still have those negative thoughts and thoughts of despair and depression that come into my mind. So even at times, and the matter of fact is, those coping mechanisms will fail you at some point. And when that happens, you are on your own. Which is why most people turn to drugs or alcohol and abuse those things. There's nothing wrong with, drinking to have fun, to loosen up. But when you do that every single day and there's no break and you do it unhealthfully, then you're going to end up self-destructing. Because you don't know how to be with yourself. Which is not easy, and I don't blame those people. There's no blame to be had here. It's hard. It's hard regardless of our situation. This is not a blame game saying you're bad and I'm better. It has nothing to do with that. It's all about trying to better ourselves. It's not trying to put shame on anybody because they're doing something that I don't do. It's nothing to do with that. But the point is, people usually fall into those categories because it makes them feel better. So the coping mechanisms will eventually fail you. You might tune into the news one day and go, "Oh God, look what they're doing now," or you read something about the occult or something about whatever the agenda is, about all the things in the propaganda, and you see it, you see it in the world, and you go, "I remember when Element was talking about that," and then you start going, "Oh my God," and you start getting depressed, and you go try to do whatever you do to cope, and it doesn't work, and then you're depressed, and you can't get out of that. And then when that happens, when those coping mechanisms fail, you're going to have to learn how to be by yourself. And that is what these people, the social engineers and the propagandists that are waging this warfare and moving this place in such a very specific direction, that is the whole point of why they're trying to weed those people out. Because they only want people that are going to be able to handle and fall in line. In our case, we don't want to fall in line. We want to maintain our individuality. But at the same time, we must we must put on a camouflage in a lot of ways to pretend that we're doing certain things. Because in a lot of respects, if you don't, then you will pay a huge price for not falling in line. So how do you maintain your individuality, but at the same time act like you're not trying to do something that maybe could lose your job? It's a balancing act that takes a lot of practice, and a lot of times it doesn't work. So that's where you have to find ways of coping with the stress of what you know and dealing with the things of the world. It's very hard to do at times. But when those coping mechanisms fail you, that's when you have to learn how to master your emotions. That's the fundamental part. The coping mechanism is a substitute. It's supplemental. It's not primary. It's not something that you do, it's like people that are into fitness. Protein shakes are not there to be there to drink all the time. They're just there to be a meal replacement or an ability to supplement protein instead of having to eat 1,000 pounds of chicken every single day. So these coping mechanisms are a supplement, and sometimes those supplements fail. And when they fail, you have to learn how to deal with things as they are when you don't have what you want. So enough of that. The whole point of coping mechanisms is to find peace within yourself. It is designed to help you cope with the chaos of this thing that we are in. And if you can find a way to deal with your emotions and control your emotions, and like I said, it's a constant battle, but the whole point of all of this is that if you can find the ability to cope in a healthy way, when there's chaos going on all around you and you can maintain calm amongst chaos, then you have basically found what you were looking for all along, which is peace. And some people find peace, they want the embodiment of peace through a woman, or through a nice house, or through a nice car, or a really good job, or whatever it is. Everybody has their own idea of what peace is. But for us, it's different because we are in a different position. We know about the trappings of those things, such as wanting peace in marriage or wanting peace with a family. We know those things have been compromised. We can't go there. The general public are going to go there if they go there, but we're not going there because we've realized this. All right, we've been down that road. We know it doesn't work. We know it's been compromised. But people have these ideas of what they want peace is. But the whole point is, when you have achieved that ability to cope in a healthy way, and you be able to stay calm amongst chaos, you've achieved what you've been looking for, which is that peace. And it is a constant battle. Just because you find a way of coping doesn't mean, like I said before, it's going to last. It's a constant battle, but at least you're on the mark. At least you have found a way to cope. And everybody has a way of coping. Everybody has to have a way of coping in this world. It's just natural. Everything's chaos here. Everybody has something that they do to cope. But at least you are trying to achieve that state of peace that you want, that you've been trying to find. And for the men that don't know this information, they're trying to find it in other ways, and that's why they keep getting so frustrated, and they get really angry, and they get depressed, and they fall into all these patterns, because they don't know that. And their thing that they're achieving, they don't know is completely been taken over and compromised. It's the old system, and the old system is not what these fuckers want anymore. So you at least are on the mark now of trying to achieve that peace. And it just didn't come in the form that you expected it to. Okay? It didn't come in the form of either you might have wanted a family, or you might have wanted a wife, or any of that. The form of peace that we've been searching didn't come in those forms. It came in a different form that we didn't expect. Whether that's going to the gym or simply being on your own. For those that are aware and awake of the fact that those elements have been compromised, we have achieved peace in a different way. It's just not the way we expected it to. And it's a constant battle, like I've said. So, let me see if there's anything else I want to mention before I repeat myself too much. And on a final note, I think, with this mini lecture, I guess you can say, is that, the people that they want to fall in line here, like I mentioned, they have no personality, these people, due to this propaganda. They want people not to have a personality. And when you talk to the people that are, they don't have an identity. They don't know about the information. They're referred to in the occult as the dead, because they are. They have no consciousness. They have no identity. They have no spirituality. They have no, spirituality meaning they don't understand the things of the non-physical, whatever embodiment that takes. They're now assimilated into this collective hive-minded Borg system. They don't have a personality or any individuality. So, I think that's all I wanted to say today. I know the video was quite long, but it was one that I wanted to thoroughly, express, because it was something that was on my mind. But as a recap here, like I said, they're moving things here in this country and in this world for in a very specific direction, and that's what all this propaganda and the transsexuals and the homosexuals and the gender crisis crap that we see, and the feminism and the politics, the advertisements, the things that you see on the television, if you watch television, which I don't. Which I guess that's the final thing I'd like to mention there, is you almost have to live in a bubble because you don't want to be infected by this propaganda. It's not healthy. And so you have to live in a bubble, but you have to be careful, because when you do live in a bubble, It can lead to isolation, feeling of isolation and loneliness if you don't know how to cope properly, which most people don't. So they end up feeling very lonely. In the 1984 Brave New World, there's a lot of very lonely people. And it's going to be hard even for the people like myself and many others that discuss this information. It's still hard. But at least you have a fucking wrench to work with. The people that are out there wandering around don't even have that. They have nothing. At least we have something to work from to help us get through living on for the rest of our lives. And that's the whole point. It will be an ever constant battle, but at least we have armor ready for that battle, and that armor is knowledge. And with that knowledge, it's better than nothing. Knowledge is very powerful when you know how to avoid certain things and how to work with certain things and what to do about certain things like what we're dealing with today in our world. With that being said, I appreciate everybody for listening. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me go on about all this. I hope this provides some help with some people. I just wanted to make this video because I wanted to flesh out some concepts that have been talked about in previous videos that I've done, and so on and so forth. So thank you for taking the time to listen, and I will see you again shortly.